the last session for today, and this session will be about Power Apps. So my name is Gilles Pommier. I'm an Office 365 Office 365 Server and Services MVP. My company is SmartView, and I come from France. That's why I have a French accent. And so the goal for this session is to talk about Power Apps. I will try to show you some of the practice I'm using in my project with Power Apps. This is, how many of you are developers? How many of you are business users? And IT pros? Okay. So the goal is to try to give you some input about Power Apps and some of the practice we are using on Power Apps project, and try to show you a lot of demos of the interesting thing that comes with Power Apps. Okay, so first of all, the agenda. So the agenda will talk about the declarative logic, the imperative logic, and advanced topic. Means that the first part will give you the input to understand how to use Power Apps and what do you think when you are using Power Apps. And I will do some demo to illustrate the declarative logic that is one of the center of the logical way to work with Power Apps. Then I will show you some imperative logics that are important in Power Apps and advanced topic. Okay, so declarative logic. The first thing that is important when you use Power Apps is that you have to think like Excel. It's very similar to Excel. Power Apps, you use the declarative thing to work with Power Apps, and this is something that is common with Excel. So the important thing is that Power Apps is made has been developed for business users and for people who have Excel in mind. So that's why the first thing that is important is to think Excel when you are using Power Apps. So there is two kinds of logic that you will find in Power Apps. The first one is this declarative logic. So declarative like Excel. And that means that if you use info path before, the logic will be the same. I mean, it means that as it is declarative, means that if you want to have something that happens, you have to modify the properties of the control, and then if you change, for example, text or things like that, automatically the change will be available on your controls, so in a declarative way. So this is the first thing to understand when you are using Power Apps. The second one that you don't have in Excel is the imperative logic. Imperative logic, like every language, JavaScript, C#, Visual Basic, and things like that, means that in Power Apps you can react with events. For example, when you click on a button, you can do something, and this is something that we can use also in Power Apps. So we have those two kinds of logic that we can use. And the first one, the first part of this session will be about the declarative logic. Okay, to illustrate that, what I want to show you is this. For example, you've got multiple components when you design a screen in Power Apps. And when you have a screen, for example, you have the properties, which is the screen color. The screen color, you can say that is red or blue or whatever. But also, if you want to use declarative logic, because you want to have the screen color will change, it depends of the rules that you want, then it will be declarative logic like this. So, for example, for this one, if the first name is blank, this is the formula that we have here, or the last name is blank, then the screen color will be red. If it's not blank, means that the first name is not empty or last name is not empty, then it will be black. So this is the declarative logic that you have to use when you are using Power Apps. And it's very simple, or it's the way that we are working also with Excel. So if you work with Excel or you use in the past InfoPass, it's the same. And then the imperative logic is different, means that when you have components like button, or if you click, I don't know, on whatever control on your screen, then you can say you have the property like onChange or onVisible, something like that, and you can react with that. So this is imperative logic when you create the action when the user do an action on your screen. So this is to illustrate the two different logic, declarative and imperative logic. To illustrate that, I will show you this first demo. Well, this one. So in this first demo, you see that when I put the slider on the right, like this, the background of my color will change automatically. Okay? And how does it work? So if I go to my screen with the fill, which fill means that you have to put the color, then you can decide, instead of giving the name of the color, then you can say that it's the value of the slider 1 and slider 2 and slider 3, like this. And with this command, automatically the fill property will change the color of the background. Okay, so this is the declarative way to use Power Apps, and this is something very easy. For example, you can change, if I take this one and I go to the color, and for example, I can change to say if slider 1 is lower than 50, then it will be black. Sorry, that value will be black, or it can be white, like this. Okay, and then it will change if I just run again. So it's white because it's more than 200, and if I go back like this, you see, it changed. So when I'm less than 50, it will be black, and more it will be white. So this is something in the declarative way. So you can use it in every property that is available. So it can be the color, it can be the text, it can be whatever. All the property that you have there can have a formula like Excel. So that's why it's really the way that it works with Excel. It's nearly the same. So if you know Excel well, then it's the same for you. So the formula reference, in Excel, the reference is with the name of the cell, and with Power Apps, it will be the name of the control. Okay? Like Excel, when you run a Power Apps application, when you develop a Power Apps application, all the screens are launched in the same time. And it means that when you run the application, all the screens are there. The only thing you do is you decide to see one screen or another screen, but all the screens are available. That means that you can access to the property. For example, if you have 3 different screens, you can access to the property of a control in screen 1 if you are in screen 3, for example. So it's like Excel, where you reference different sheets and you can access to the cells with the sheets, so it's exactly the same. Okay, so you've got some examples that you can use when you learn Power Apps. One example you can use is the Alumni Association, where you have a lot of information about the formula you can use. So, of course, when you are using condition or properties in Power Apps, you can mix different properties, and it can be something like this. So be careful, because sometimes it will be difficult to read. My tips when you want to create long formulas, or when you have property like this, is you take the property and you split step by step to understand what the property is doing. So because sometimes it will be difficult, even if you have IntelliSense, because you have IntelliSense in Power Apps that is available, but sometimes it's not so easy to read. So when I'm working with other people on Power Apps project, sometimes I take the formula like this, I put in Notepad, and I'm doing a step by step to understand what the formula is doing. Okay? Input and output properties. So it depends on the properties, but for some properties there are only input, other are input or output, and some other properties are output only. So you can access to the different properties, but you have to be aware of the way it works. Is it input? Is it output? So you have to deal with that, and you have these different situations. What is, I told you that there is a lot of common between Excel and Power Apps, and this is a screen that shows you in green the common function between Excel and Power Apps. So that's why if you know Excel, you can do Power Apps, and it will be easy for you, because all the formula, all the functions are nearly the same. As you see, the team, the Power Apps team, has done a great job to try to match to the Excel function. Another example that is interesting, this is a Stack Overflow function, an Excel question. One person wants to know how to do Excel reverse string search. So this is the solution. And the solution is exactly the same if you use Power Apps. So let's jump to this demonstration. It's in this screen. So the formula, the declarative formula, will be in this screen. So you see the formula, right, is exactly the same. The difference is in the formula here. I run this. In the formula here, there is the name of the cell, and in my case, this is the input text. So how it works? It's easy. Like this. Okay, so it was just to illustrate that if you want to do something like this, just to have word by word, then this is something that which will be exactly the same as we do in Excel in a declarative way. Okay, so the logical is the same. So there is a primitive data type, number, text, Boolean, date and time, dat, and grid. There is you can manipulate grid also in Power Apps. There is you can deal with null value. We can test if it is blank or not. You can create some tables or objects that we call record. So if you want to create object, or a table, you declare a table, and then you put the different properties and the value of the properties like this, and then you can use this object in your Power Apps application. So when you have to deal, for example, with inputs that needs to be split in table, then you can use record for that. So if you use table function, you've got a lot of possibility. You can pass argument. You can have a lot of function to filter, to sort by column. So I will show you some demo about that. but this is common function that you have in Power Apps. And of course, you have access to the data source. So the data source will be external data source like SharePoint, like SQL Server, or like CDS, Common Data Service Entities, and things like that. You can create data source, read data source, and you can manage, you can deal, you can connect to data source in your Power Apps application. Okay? And what is interesting also is you can deal with relational data. That means that if, for example, you have a product data source, and of course the product data source will have some review or reservation or supplier, then with the relational database, you can get information if you have the product and you want to have the review, then you just have to write in Power Apps the formula. I will show you a demo because it will be more easier to understand. So the demo will be this one. So I have an application here with this screen. So with this screen, the first step is this one. If you want, this demo is to try to show you how to do a master detail. If you want to have the first list, this one, and you want to have the detail of the information, or you want to have the detail of the other information, you can do this like this. So first, in my data source, I have a gallery like this connected to the customer demo. So first, I think I have to show you the datas. So the datas are in CDS, on the Common Data Service, sorry. So I will show you the data, the entities. So I have created entities for this session. So for these entities, I have created the city demo, the customer demo, and if I remember well, the order demo. So if I click here to see the entity, so there are some data that I put in the CDS, like this, but there is also a relationship. I mean that the order demo, there is a relation with the city and a relation with the customer, because an order has been done by a customer, and a customer belongs to a city. So this is a relationship between my different entities in the CDS. And when I define those entities, it will be available for me like this. So first, if I want to show the customer demos, then I just have to put a gallery, and the data source will be the customer demo. I can edit, but you know that I can edit the different field and change if I want. So if I want to do a master detail, then the second one here, which is a form. So this is a form that I have created, and it's also matched to the customer demo, data source, of course. But if I want to do my master detail, then I have to run the the item properties with the gallery one selected. Means that when I select an item here, it will show the details in this part. If I run this one, so I have the left here will show data, and if I click on one item, you see that I have my details of the information that is available for me. Okay, so the first step of the master detail is to have the same data source, and on a declarative way, when I take this form and I go to the item properties, I say gallery 1 selected, and automatically the data will be displayed. In the button, this is something interesting. In the button, I only did a submit form to submit my form. Means that when I run and I click on one item, and for example, I change one value to inactive, and I click on the button, then it will save the data for me automatically with just one action. So this is, if you don't know Power Apps, you see that it's very easy to do a master detail and to update data. The submit form update the data automatically. The part that is interesting is this one. This one, so this is another data table. For this one, you see that the items which should be the data source, is not connected to a specific data source, but is connected to the Glally one selected dot order demos. That means that when I select an item, I can automatically get all the orders in a declarative way. Okay, so it's very easy because of the relationship. This information is available for me automatically. So if I want to write this formula, it's very easy and it works. So if I just one again, then I click on one item, it will refresh the data. And if I click on this one, you see, it will refresh automatically my data. So there is a product or orders, and I want to have automatically all the orders that are available. So I show you again the formula for that. So this is a product here, and I want to have the order for the product I have selected. So this is something very easy to write, and if you want to write in one screen some master detail, it is the way that you will do that. Okay, so it was the goal of this demo to show you some rational data. Other things that are important when you are using Power Apps. So when you are using Power Apps, you may have seen that on your application, if you go to File and App Settings, you've got the Advanced Settings here, and in these Advanced Settings, you've got some information, some feature that you can activate, which is called Preview Features or Experimental Features. So maybe you have a question about that, experimental features or preview feature. The way that it works is the experimental feature are something that are not activated by default and is for early adopters. Mean that if you use experimental feature, then you have to know that it's a beta version of feature by Microsoft. But they want to have feedback with experimental features. That's why they put some experimental features in Power Apps. When it goes to preview, then that means that a lot of people have tested the different features, and preview means that you can use it for new apps, and this is something that will come later for everybody. So preview means that you can use it if you want, and after that it will be shipped. So shipped means that it's available for everybody. Okay, so another interesting demo. I just have to find it. Okay, this one. Sorry. So it was in preview a few months ago, but now it's live. When you go to Insert, you see that when you go to Media, you've got a barcode scanner that is available. And the barcode scanner is a control that you can put on your forms and you can use. So if you want to use the barcode scanner, it's very easy. You just put the control, and then, for example, I will have some command like this. If I go to OnScan. So for this one, for example, it will launch the barcode if it's possible. And on the OnScan function on this one, here, I will create a collection. So if you use, perhaps, this is the way that you create a collection. So a collection with the collect function, I give a name for my collection, and then I give the different field of my collection. So the barcode info, who scanned, dead scan. So if I want to have the barcode info, the only thing I have to do is to use my control.value, and that's all. So if I want to use this and to show you how it works, so I just switch to the 5. No, switch to the 7. Sorry. 6? Okay. Okay. So my scan application is here. So if I want to scan, I just click on my button and then go and see, for example, this. And here we go. Okay, if I just want to try with something else to scan, like this, and it puts the information. So the scan barcode is something very easy to use. 7. So you see, you just put the control on the screen, and then there is a function to get the value of the barcode scanner like this, and that's all that you have to do. Okay? In some controls that are interesting also and I like and are not very common, for example, here you have the pen input, like this, that you can use. So the pen input is a control, the same, that you can use to create inputs from a pen, and then, for example, it creates an image, and you can send this image by email if you want. So this is something very easy to use. So there are some controls interesting in Power Apps. If you want to create interesting application with some controls that are available for you automatically. And there is some very interesting control you can use in Power Apps. Okay, so it was the demo about the barcode scanner. Okay, so you can deal also in Power Apps with error handling. So you have some function, if error, with a try-catch. So if you're a developer, you know that error handling is important, and you've got function in Power Apps for that. So try-catch, or if you want to be notified when there is a catch, if you want to be notified with the error, it's something that you can use also. So error handling is something that is important to understand and to use with Power Apps. Okay, so the imperative logic. Okay, so I have this example here where I can create a collection and show you the imperative logic. The way it works is this way. So I have a button here, add to collection. So a collection is the same as when I use the collect function. I give a name for the collection. and then I give the different field for this collection. And here, what is interesting is that I add to the collection the input, so the input of the text box here, and the input of the priority, like this. And so this function, if I run, I add to the collection, and then I just display in this table. So if I click and enter some value and priority, for example, 19, I to collection, then you see that automatically it's displayed. What is interesting is that if I just put 5, add to collection, it will add the input to the collection, but it's not displayed here. Why it is not displayed? Because in the declarative way, so if I take this data table show my collection, and we sort with priority, but it will filter for priority that are above 10. So if I enter 5 here, it will go to my collection, but in my data table, it will not appear because it's not with this filter that I put here. It will not be shown because it will be less than 10. Okay, so in Power Apps, you deal with action that you are doing when, you, for example, you click, when you select a button. And there is also the declarative way. So when you select a button, then I create my collection. And with this collection, takes the input of my different text box here. But after, I can decide just to show some input. So this data table is connected to my collection, but with a condition. So the event on the state changes. So you have events you can react, for example, on the click on the button or screen invisible. And so the button on select, screen on visible, or you have also a function on the app on start. My recommendation for that is, if it's possible, use the declarative way, because the declarative way is the way that you have to work with Power Apps. But sometimes it's not possible, so sometimes you can use the events to react to something in Power Apps, and you have to deal with both. So everything you do is in declarative way, it's easier to read, easier to maintain, but you can also use this property if you want to modify or to do action. You have variable in Power Apps, so you have different type of variable. You've got global variables. You use the set command to do global variables. So global variables are available to all the screens that you define. The context variable you create with the update context. Update context means that the variable will be available only on one screen, on the screen where you are, but it's not possible to access to the variable on the other screen. So it depends what you need. On my project, I know that I usually prefer to do global variables because sometimes you need a variable to store data on one screen, and then you realize that you will need after on another screen. So I'm usually I'm using a lot of global variables, and but it depends on the project and it depends on your needs. Then you can also create collection. So with the collect function, the collect function is used to create a collection, and you give a name of the collection, and you got other function with the collection. You can clear a collection, you can clear collect to remove all the objects of a collection. And the collection can be saved, load, and things like that. So there is some function you can use with the collection of objects. And collection of objects is the way that the developers are working in language like C# and things like that. That's why you use a lot of collection in Power Apps, because collection can be a data source for control if you need. So this is very easy. when you create a collection, to use this collection as a data source of an object. So when you are in Power Apps, all the objects that you are using are strongly typed. Means that, for example, when you modify a properties which is a text and you want to put an integer or you want to put a date, sometimes Power Apps will say, no, it's not possible because you need to convert because the data type is not the same. So I think personally this is something interesting because it means that you have to think of what you are doing. But sometimes when the conversion is not working, it can take you a lot of time to understand why and to understand how to convert and why it doesn't understand your conversion. But Power Apps has a strongly typed system, and this is something very robust, I think, and I prefer this solution. Okay, so for example, for the variable you are strongly typed. Okay. So for the collection demo, the collection demo I've already done in the previous demonstration with the click on the button and things like that. So I will not do again. Screen navigation. So screen navigation, when you first create Power Apps application with the templates that are available, it will create for you automatically different screen, and you have screen navigation. Screen navigation is something you have to think when you create your Power Apps application, because you have to deal with what the user how he will use your solution. So you have different functions you can use to navigate to different screens, and you have other functions, for example, to go back to the previous screen, but you have to be careful with that. I will illustrate in the next slide like this. So when you create an out-of-the-box application with Power Apps, you have, by default, a browse screen. The browse screen will show all the items of your data. You've got a detail screen, and you've got an edit screen. The detail screen means that you have the detail of one item. So if you click on an item here, you navigate to the detail screen of the item. And you've got also the edit screen. Edit screen usually is used for two things: for the edit mode and also for when you want to add a new item. This is the same screen that is used when you are in edit and when you add an item. And I'll show you after how to use that. So for the browse screen, it will get the data from your data source, and then automatically it will display the data in your screen. You have some function to filter, to sort, that are automatically done. And what is interesting, if you use those out-of-the-box application, and when you want to see the formula that are available, for example, to filter, it is something very interesting for learning, if you want to learn how to do filter or how to do sort in Power Apps. So this is to see all the items of my data source. Then, when I select an item, I go to the detail screen, okay, which is the details form which shows all the fields but are read-only. And when I select an item and in the detail screen, I can also go to the edit form. So the edit form allows me to change the value of my data and to save the data to the data source. Okay, so when I'm in the detail screen or the edit screen, in the detail screen, for example, I have a remove function. The remove function can delete an item. And in the edit screen, I can modify the value and then use the submit form, the same function that I show you in one of the previous demo, and it will save the data to your data source automatically. For the transition, so this is something that you have to be careful for that, because, for example, you must when I'm creating application in Power Apps with a lot of screen, sometimes I'm doing a storyboard of the screens with my customers, just to understand what he wants to do and what are the different transitions that I have to manage from the different screens. Why do I need that? Because you have different functions. You can navigate to a new screen, or you can use a back function. So back function is something very easy because you just put back and it goes back to the previous screen. But you have to be careful because, for example, if you use back instead of navigate, sometimes it will go back to the previous screen and not navigate to the edit screen. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful about your transition. So this is something that you must manage and you must be aware when you create your Power Apps application. And the last thing that is important, as I told you, the edit screen, it can be used in two modes. One mode which will be edit form, and another mode which will be new form. So when I navigate to the edit screen, I'm saying if it's a new form or an edit form mode. And then in the screen, if I'm in a new form, then all the fields are empty. And if I'm in an edit form, of course, it will display the item that I have selected. Okay, and in this edit form, I can check if I'm in edit form or new form to be sure that I can display some control if I'm in edit form but not in new form and things like that. Okay, so some other thing that I want to show you, advanced thing that I want to show you. When I'm with Power Apps, I can use connectors to connect to different services. So there is a lot of service you can use when you are in Power Apps, or you can also, so you have more than 2,000 connectors available, but you can also connect to your own service, means that you can create your own connectors if you want to connect to, for example, on-prem service, or you want to connect to service that does not exist. So this morning, in one of my sessions this morning, and I just show you the results because it was a session about the connector. What we did this morning for an application. I think it was this one. Okay, so this is a connector that we have created this morning in the session that is using a yield service to create a custom connector to connect to a service that is not available in the connector. And this is what we call the custom connector. So this was a custom connector to find things like this. And we were using Yelp for that. Yelp. This solution. So okay, just 1 second. So this service is used to find whatever you want, and you can use this service. This service does not exist as a connector, but you can create a custom connector to integrate those possibilities in your application like this. So to create a custom connector, just to show you that this is something easy. If I go to Flow, so you've got all the connectors available here, but you can go to your custom, an option which is called Custom Connector. And here you can create your custom connector. So this was this one we were using this morning. And the way that we have created this is just a declarative way. So if I just edit this connector, the connector has a name, there are some function, and after, just to show you, I will just show you how it has been done, because it's something very easy. So there is the definition here. And the definition shows me the different service I want to get from my API. So for example, here I want to use the get information to search to the EL API. I can pass some parameters like term, latitude, longitude. This is the way it works in my application. Terms, latitude, longitude. And then I just need to provide a response. So if I go to this, I can import the result here of my command, and it will take automatically all the different parameters from me. So this is just something declarative if you want to use custom connectors in Power Apps with something like this. So custom connectors is something very interesting if you want to have more flexibility or more possibility in your Power Apps application. Or you can use all the connectors that you see here. There is more than 200 connectors available for Power Apps, for Flow. And you can use it. Okay, so there is tabular connectors, but I want to show you something more on the Flow. So if you want to have a connection between Power Apps and Flow, it's possible. It means that you can create your design in your forms in your Power Apps application. You have the declarative way to display some data, but if you want to have more business rules or more things that you want to do and Power Apps it's not possible to do in Power Apps, then you can use Flow for that. It's something very easy. So I just want to show you this. I will do this from scratch. That's okay. So if I create a new screen, like this, and I just insert text, an input text and a button. Then if I click on this button, and in the action menu, you see that I have Flow available. So if I want to run an action when I click on the button, then it's possible. And if I run to show you to create a new flow, so I can create a new flow. It will go to Microsoft Flow, and you see this is a Power Apps action, and I can use this Power Apps action for, so I can create a new step, for example, if I want to do something in SharePoint. To create item. So of course I have to provide a SharePoint site. And for example, I have a test like this. And it can take some parameters that I can put in my call. For example, if I want to pass parameter to my Power Apps, and I can use this parameter here. And so this is the way that we can launch Microsoft Flow with Power Apps. And I want to show you also. So I will not run this flow, but I want to show you. You can also give a response to Power Apps. Response means that you can give output. So for example, when I create an item in SharePoint, I can decide to put my creation time, for example. So this is the name of my variable. And I will take a field of SharePoint with my project function. And this is the way that I will give back some data to Power Apps like this. And this is a way to integrate Microsoft Power Apps with Microsoft Flow. Sorry. Okay, so the only thing that we have to do is when you have created your flow, so I'm just saving, but I don't think it will work because, okay, I'll just save. It seems to be okay. And if I go back here, then I just click on this action, and this action will add the flow to my button. Okay, and then it will tell me that I can run the flow. Okay, when I run this button, so I just have to put here the name of the flow. Okay, in my button. So I think it don't recognize because my flow is not good. But this is I just want to show you the way that Power Apps can be integrate a flow command automatically. Okay, so you can integrate Power Apps with MS Flow. Then, if you want to go further with some business rules that are not available in your out-of-the-box Canvas application in Power Apps, then you can use the model-driven portal, the model-driven portal application. If you use this command, the CDS, of course, then if you want to do some advanced business rules, you can do with the model-driven portal, where you will use entities and business rules to create more in-depth condition or things like that, and business rules that cannot be done with out-of-the-box Power Apps. And also, if you use the Common Data Service, there is also workflow available. So, of course, I suggest to use Microsoft Flow if you want to integrate Flow in Power Apps, but you have to know if you use the Common Data Service, comes with some workflow. So synchronous or asynchronous workflow where you can define and launch workflow with CDS. Okay, so this is something you're creating in declarative way, not in the Power Apps screen, but in the settings where you create a different process. But this is something so only available with CDS for your Power Apps application. So this is the end of this session. Do you have any? So this is all the resource, and you can have the application here that is available if you want to do the demo and to get all the materials that I showed you. Do you have any question about Power Apps? Yes? Yeah, if you want to connect, so the question is, if you want to connect Power Apps application with on-premise application, you have to use the data gateway. So the data gateway, which is common to Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow, is something that you install on a server. And with the data gateway, it's possible to access on-prem data with the different service, Power BI, Power Apps, Flow. You can create also connectors for that, but you have to install the data gateway. Yes? So when you run a flow and you have the response, when you can have different types. So this is very basic for the moment. You can go back with text, with numbers, date and time, and things like that. And in your Power Apps application, you define an object, a collection, and in this collection, a name of a collection will get automatically the output value that comes from Flow in response. So if you use the response object and you define your different variables, then it will when you on the button you run your flow, but on the run you just create surround with the name of a collection, and the collection will get all the different parameters, output parameters. Yeah. No, No, outside of the company, it will not be possible. I mean, you mean that outside your tenant, Office 5 tenant? No, it's not possible for now. I mean that you can share your flow or your Power Apps with people in your Office 365 tenant. So it can be guests or things like that, but it must exist in your tenant. But if you want to share with another company, then it will not be possible because it's linked to the Office 365 users. So it's not possible to share anonymously or things like that. So it's something that you use internally. I don't know. I think you can ask a question to the Microsoft booth. I know this is something that is requested by a lot of people, but I don't know if it's on the roadmap for now. Yeah? You mean that if you want to manage... I didn't have the case for now. So you mean if you for the interface, the UI of your... So one of the techniques I'm using when I'm using Power Apps is I'm using specific forms, which I call the technical forms. And with these technical forms, I'm using it to to define my different properties. So for example, if I want that all the input text will be bold with size of 18, then I'm use this technical screen to define what I want. And then I match all the properties of my different input text to say that the input text.text must be or input text dot I don't know, not text, sorry, font, sorry, must be reference to my information in my technical form. So if I have to deal with, but I don't have an example in mind, but if I have to deal with multilingual, this is, I think, something I will use something like that, just to check in which language I am, and then in my technical screen, the different label in different language, and then I will, in my properties of my UI, say, for example, if I'm detect in a variable that I'm in French, then I would say, go to the property with the label in French in my technical screen. Okay? Sorry? Yeah? Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Size, what you mean? No, I don't think there is limitation about that. You mean by limitation in terms of number of screens? No, I don't think so. I deal with application where there was a lot of screens, and I don't know if there is a limitation for that. I don't think so. Okay, so time is up. So if you have other questions, I can answer. But I thank you for those who are still there in my session, and I hope you have learned some things in my session about Power Apps, and I'm here for other questions if you have. Thank you very much.